it is inevitable that tech will be, if it isn't already, the biggest industry in the city. Listen, I run an organization called Tech NYC. I have no idea how you define that. Every company is a tech company, like say however you want to say it, right? As the city makes that transition, we spend our time at Tech NYC thinking about what that means for New York politically, what that means culturally, what does that mean civically, what does it mean philanthropically, as technology, both the people and companies building it and the technology itself changes our city. We want to make sure that that transition lifts as many boats as possible.
Julie Samuels, thanks for talking to us today.
Thanks for having me.
We're going to use this in a lot of different places, but one of the places we're going to use this is the Internet History Podcast. And for those purposes, anybody that's listened to that podcast, you went to the University of Illinois?
I did. I have some Internet history.
Okay. So Champaign-Urbana.
Champaign-Urbana.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know where my accent's coming from. Mosaic, NCSA. Okay. When were you there?
Yeah.
Did you overlap with all that?
I did. I was there at post Mark Andreessen. So
Okay.
I graduated college in 2000. I was in Champaign. I was a journalism major, actually. Like many people's tech and internet history, mine was somewhat accidental if you were growing up in the 80s and 90s. And mine was accident. I mean, I was always very interested. I was like an early AOL user, but I wasn't and still am not technical. But I went to the University of Illinois because I'm from Chicago. Had never heard of NCSA. And I went to college in 1996.
This is so bad. Can I interrupt? Just for listeners and context, NCSA, when the internet is born, there's like, it's a government sort of thing. It's the National
Supercomputing Application.
Okay. So it was a government run thing. It was a
government-run supercomputer
of the internet. Mark Andreessen, Mosaic, which became Netscape. Listen, look at the Internet History Podcast. All this history has been told. But
yes,
it's crucial to know that that's where you were. Yes,
that's where I was. But I didn't even know. So I was a journalism major. And I thought I wanted to be an economics reporter, which is actually kind of crazy. If you know me now, that really doesn't make much sense. And I had this professor who I still keep in touch with, and he knew I wanted to be an economics reporter, and I was looking for a job on campus, and he said to me, there's this center, I guess, this NCSA, National Center for Supercomputing Applications, and they're looking for a communications intern, and explaining technology to regular people is hard, and explaining economics to regular people is hard. So maybe you should try and get this internship, and you can learn a little bit about journalism that way, about explaining complicated concepts to everyday people. So I got an internship at NCSA. That was probably, let's say, 1997, 1998, probably 1997. I think I worked there for 3 years, the last 3 years of college. Definitely.
Was Larry Smarr still?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah. God, I've heard that name in a long time. And I was the comms intern. So it was super geeky. It was like the geeky geeks. No one really knew what they were up to. Obviously, it had a huge moment, which was that Mark Andreessen, while he was an undergrad, had invented Mosaic there. The team there had invented Mosaic. He dropped out. He left. Mosaic obviously became Netscape, graphical web browser. Here we are. And there were a ton of people who were still at NCSA from when Mark had been there. A lot of them were a little bit bitter. I think that he had left and he'd made a ton of money.
Because, and I'm going to interject again, if you haven't listened to these things, to form Netscape, Jim Clark and Mark Andreessen go back to, what is it, Champaign, or how am I saying it?
Urbana.
Urbana.
You're from the Midwest, Brian.
Oh, right. My wife is from Michigan, so okay, say it like my wife would. They went and recruited a lot of the engineering team who the first episodes of the Internet History Podcast are talking to a lot of them. But so your point is that the folks that didn't get recruited are a little.
A
But
little bitter.
there was Spyglass. Didn't that come out of there
Yeah,
too?
yeah, yeah. By the
Yeah.
way, the people, I really quickly to give you just a little bit of color. There were a bunch of people they all called Netscape Nutscrape. That was what it
Mm.
was called there internally.
Because there were rumors that maybe they took the code base and
Yeah,
yeah,
there
what?
was a lot of yeah. It seemed a little dramatic. But that was not, I was not, well, like I said, I wasn't even technical. I was literally writing like these little press releases for the website. And it was very wonky stuff because it was academic, it was research driven, it wasn't consumer facing at all. But that was really fun. And, like I said, just I guess my career really was such that, like most people's, a lot of coincidence and a lot of happenstance. And I had a really big office there. So I spent a lot of time there. Even like if I was just studying or doing something unrelated to my job, I would hang out there. Sometimes and there was really fast internet there, and
Mm,
I was still on dial-up.
right.
We were still on dial-up in the university was like transitioning over. So
Until late into the 90s, again, kids, real heads know that you kind of, there was a time period where you couldn't get an email address or an internet connection unless you were at a university
yeah,
or your employer paid for it, etc.
even at a university, I think that my senior year in college was the first time that I had fiber to my apartment. So that means for my first 3 years of college, I was still on dial up. Oh, I was still on dial up senior year too, which is actually why I never really used Napster.
Mm. Right, right.
If I was at work, if I was at NCSA, I had a very, very fast connection. So, I hung out there a lot. And I had a great boss. And she was a communications person too, not a really technical person. And she was also a deadhead. And she was really into John Perry Barlow, and she was really into this organization in San Francisco called EFF. So
Hmm, hmm.
I this was again all in the late '90s, and it always held a lot of lore for me because I was really introduced. That was my introduction to tech culture, I'd say. And then I had a couple summer jobs that were relevant. One, I guess, would be particularly funny. The summer between my junior and so also I was learning as part of my coursework, my journalism degree, I was learning a
Hmm.
lot about, again, like I said, it was a journalism major, and I took this course, journalism law, First Amendment law. It was just after the Supreme Court had decided uh, uh, some pretty big cases around CDA 230, the ACLU litigation. There was a lot happening in the legal field then, thinking,
Is this the stuff around the Napster time? No, this is before
yeah,
that. Yeah,
no, it was before
yeah,
Napster.
yeah. But it's still trying to figure out, okay, what is this new technology? What are the parameters around this new technology? Things that we're still the I'm forgetting right now. The 1996 law that allows users, you can't be sued if you're a platform. All
Yeah,
those laws, they're
it was my
brand new.
1998 litigation. Exactly. So that was all happening while I was an undergrad. I was learning about it in school while I was working at NCSA. And, it was all really, really interesting to me. And then the summer between my sophomore or junior and senior year, I got this internship at Scripps Howard, a company that owns a bunch of newspapers, to help. It was just an internship to work in the office where they were putting the news on. And so I went, and this was pretty crazy. I took same thing, like some of my professors helped me find this job. I took the job. Um, this is embarrassing. I thought it was in Nashville, and I like sent my dad the information on the job, and he said, "Julie, this job is in a town called Knoxville, not Nashville." And
Uh,
I said, "Oh my God, where is that?" And he said, "I don't know."
well, it's still in Tennessee,
Yeah.
but
I knew this. I got the state right. So anyway, I went down there it was just so funny. So it was in the Knoxville News Sentinel, which was just one of the newspapers owned by this newspaper chain. And there was this
Scripps,
like
yeah.
office. It was like out of a movie. This space. We were in the newspaper's office, but there was this space. It was like almost up in this attic area. We were like the bastard stepchildren of the newspaper. And it was this like dark little room. And we essentially would take the news that was being produced for the newspapers in print, and we would make it very basic HTML coding, which is pretty much the extent of my technical skills.
Mm.
And they're rusty. And we would take these packages. I remember I did a lot of work taking like the real estate packages, the kind of like lifestyle stuff for the newspapers that was being written, and would then push it out to all the papers owned by Scripps Howard. So it was really early days of putting the news online.
You're not the first person. I've talked to people at the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, other places. The degree to which this is the skunk works up in the attic over here.
Yeah.
I know you didn't stay there super long, but like there was this. How long do you think that was always the sense before maybe newspapers or media?
Well, yeah, I think a lot about this actually.
Mm.
When did that shift? It definitely was starting to shift 2000, 2001, but it's still, and I can actually really quickly tell you about my first job, because my first full-time job out of college,
Yeah.
also relevant to this. Maybe let me do that and come back to your question.
Yeah, sure.
Because my next job, I think, showed a little bit more of the shift. I finished college in 2000. I went to work for a political magazine called the National Journal in DC, but I went to go work for nationaljournal.com, which was, to your point, different than the National Journal. When I got there, it was in a totally different building. It was in the Virginia suburbs, in this like kind of funky townhouse.
Totally different people. You're getting the scraps from the
That's right.
big kids table. Yeah.
We were .com. And everyone else was in, I think at that time, was in the Watergate building, which is a very fancy building in DC. This was in 2000, like I said. But I will also, I had that job for 1 year. Okay. And over the course of that 1 year, we moved into a new fancier office in the district. And they were, at that time, so in 2001, they were consolidating everyone, at least geographically. So I think that kind of answers your question a little bit. And it was becoming clear that the staffs were.
Let me put a spin on that. So, okay, folks are like, I keep asking people this. Folks are like, okay, this internet is a thing. And then the .com bubble bursts. And my memory of it being here in New York after the bubble bursting is people are cheering because, oh my God, the fad is over. We can go back to the way it was. What are your memories of that, especially vis-a-vis journalism and stuff?
Yeah, well, let me tell you a little bit about what I did. My day-to-day was when I was at nationaljournal.com. One of my main tasks was we had a morning newsletter, and it was a very, very early morning newsletter. I don't mean early in the day. I mean early in the evolution of morning newsletters. And a group of us, there were 3 or 4 of us maybe, who had to get there at like 6 a.m., 6 something, which is very early when you're 22. And we would split up the country by north and south. And each of us would have a list of city newspapers we were supposed to check every morning. And we would start on the East Coast, and we would refresh the newspapers from the east to the west, because by the time, we had to get, when we got there, it was 3 a.m. in California. There was no new news. The point I'm trying to make, actually, the long wind up here, is that in those days, newspapers were still publishing how they always published, and they were posting their news once a day in the morning.
Yeah.
Some of them were refreshing once midday, but generally they were just writing a story a day and posting it in the morning. And we would get to work, and we would, crawl across the country, find the headlines. And as soon as the California papers tended to post a little earlier than some of the sleepier Pacific Northwest towns, obviously. But once we got like the Washington State, Oregon, once we got the news from those papers, we would hit publish on our morning newsletter, which was called Morning Edition. And that would, go out. We would try and do it just before 9 a.m. So that wasn't my entire job, but that was a big part of my job in 2000, 2001. So when I think it showed the tension you're asking about, which is, did people were resisting the change,
or not only were they resisting the change, they felt like, okay, we had to give a lip service to this fad for a few years, but now it's over. And then there were certain people that were like, well, it's not over. In fact, this is like inning 2 or 3 or something like that.
First of all, I was young, and the people who worked in the offices with the internet
Hmm.
people,
Hmm.
in the attics and the townhouses where I
Yeah.
worked.
See, this is our age bias where
Yeah,
no
we were
one.
all true
Yeah.
believers. We were all like, I remember where I was standing when I first learned. I remember when I first learned about Google. Like, I remember when I ordered my first book on Amazon. It was in those offices with those people who were all really, frankly, we were really early to think about a lot of those things. And so I don't remember there being much glee, because I think a lot of us, we also, because we were young, we didn't feel, I think a lot of the glee that you're talking about, a lot of the ha ha, we told you so, came from people who felt like they missed the boat. But we hadn't missed anything. We were on the boat.
Yeah.
We were the first people on the boat.
You know what? Put a pin in that, because maybe we'll come back to that in terms of like things like AI and like
Yeah.
cultural or tech trends and things like that. Forgive me. I'm gonna jump a little bit
Yeah.
because
Sure.
I want to get to the EFF, because I want to leave a lot of
Oh,
time
yeah.
for
We haven't gotten
contemporary
to New
stuff.
York. Yeah.
Okay, okay. So you know what? You're right. New York. So tell me your sense of the New York City tech scene when you're joining it, how it evolves. And look, I'm going to tee you up in ways that are probably not good journalistic practices, but like, why is the New York City tech
Oh, yeah.
scene different? And give me anything you want.
Okay. I have a lot, but I have to say that I wasn't really back here. I lived here after DC, and I was doing some First Amendment work, and then I kind of became a lawyer, and then I went to EFF, and then I came back here.
Right. So
So
legal
maybe,
stuff, and again, we're
yeah,
alighting over issues of determining this new technology, and maybe we'll come back to this in a second, of like what are the parameters and how can we, or we, depending on who you're working for and what your positions are, how can we guide
yeah,
how these sorts of regulatory and legal
yeah. I
things
mean,
happen?
this is
Yeah.
literally what I spend all my time thinking about.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
I mean,
take me there to the 2000s and uh, all that stuff.
yeah. Okay. So I mean, I guess I would say, so like fast forward, I spent some time in New York. I was in New York on September 11th. I had a
Mm,
bit of a crazy September 11th story, not tragic. And I mean, but it really, from that moment, I was like, oh, well, it stamped me as a New Yorker for life, I would say.
mm, mm.
And I would also say I always knew I'd come back eventually, but life has a weird way of conspiring, and I went to law school, and then I was an IP lawyer for a while, and then I went to EFF, um, which was like the dream job. It was like the why I went to law school job. It was like thinking about,
Why was it a dream job for you? Why was that what you wanted to do?
well, um, I was always like a First Amendment geek. Super, super just interested in the First Amendment, always found it fascinating, as long as I can remember. And I was, ever since undergrad, like, fascinated by what the First Amendment looked like as we transitioned to the internet. And still am. I mean, that we still, like,
Mm,
we're living in that
hmm.
moment right now. Like, I think about it all the time, how we haven't really, gotten that far. I remember really quickly, not to go back, I'm going to do this forever. You're never going to get rid of me. But I had this moment where I remember I was sitting in undergrad, and it was like the light bulb went on, and I understood that we would get news in real time, and what I envisioned it would look like, though I didn't, it was so early. I thought, do you remember those high school yearbooks, and the page stock is like kind of thick?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I had this, like, what I thought we would get is you'd get like a New York Times book, and the pages would like update.
Well, and I've interviewed people, and you know what the news event was that trained at least certain media folks that you have to be 24/7 was the Princess Diana
Oh yeah.
death
What year
in
was that?
'97, I think. I mean,
97.
and not everyone got on board at the same time, but yeah.
No.
Anyway, go on.
So EFF was the dream job because I was really interested in the First Amendment. I was really interested in what freedom of speech and the free flow of information looked like on the internet. And there's literally no organization. So that was late 2000s. I ended up moving there in 2010. There's no organization in the world in 2009, 2010 that's thinking about that more than EFF. And so I picked up and moved across the country. I also spent a ton of time on software patent work. So I did like half my time was spent on copyright and trademark and First Amendment, and half was on software patents.
Including patent trolls, which we can go
Yeah,
into. Yes, go
yeah,
continue.
yeah.
Sorry.
Mark Cuban. I was the Mark Cuban chair to eliminate stupid patents, which the
Hmm.
Wall Street Journal called possibly the best new job title in 2012, which I thought really was probably a career peak.
And also, podcasters owe you for that crazy podcasting
Oh yeah,
troll
yes,
lawsuit.
we got
Yes,
rid of the podcasting troll.
yes, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. We're going everywhere.
Yeah,
Okay, so
there's a lot.
EFF, First Amendment, all that good stuff.
Yeah, and which was, I mean, it was great. And we were there, I was there during the Arab Spring. I was there during Sopa Pippa. I could like all of these things, all of these moments. The podcasting trolls were unbelievable. I had so many, I went on Adam Carolla's podcast. He said some crazy shit. Can I swear on this podcast?
Yes, yeah.
uh, it was great. Yeah. And it was a really interesting time. It's I'd say a lot of the issues we were working on at EFF were really, the time I was there, they were really becoming mainstream. They were going from this kind of like more niche internet telecom like bubble.
Or like we're in industry specific, like
Yes.
lobbying or legal group or something versus no, this is everything. This is
Everything.
pervading society.
That's right. And it was post the dot-com bubble. It was just post the dot-com. It was just post 2008, the recession.
Mm-hmm.
Things were just starting to kind of pick up again. And everyone was paying attention. And everyone's parents were asking, what is this Facebook thing? Things were just becoming really, really mainstream. They were becoming mainstream in DC. They were becoming mainstream, in
I always say 2009 is the iPhone, and it's also Facebook opening up to opening up to everybody. So your mother gets an iPhone and a Facebook account.
Yeah. And, I had been living in Chicago, and in 2010, I moved to San Francisco for this job, and it was so fun and it was so interesting. And I also remember I'd just be out and about in San Francisco, and I'd meet people all the time who were like, I'm building an app that's going to do this, or I'm building a thing that's going to do Y. And, I'm, like I said, I grew up in Chicago too. I'm got some pretty Midwestern tendencies at times. And I'd always be like, that is crazy. But it also felt really, really refreshing because people, it was so optimistic. It was just so like the sky is the limit. It felt like, and again, then the Arab Spring happened, and it was like, this is it. This is what we came here to do. Like, it's all happening right now. And God, it was an amazing time. And Sopa Pippa, which has a huge New York angle too, but that too.
You know what? I want to poke at this because I remember that too. And we're in a different era now. But the feeling of that, well, this is why we all fell in love with technology, that you level a playing field, you give potentially every human being on the planet access to all of the same knowledge, all of the same technology. Man, that 2010s era, even into the 2010s, didn't we feel like
it was amazing?
We were killing it.
We did it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know where to go with that because the question.
I think about it all the time. I think about it a lot. I think about it a lot now because obviously we also clearly we created a lot of vacuums, and a lot of bad people and bad things filled some of those vacuums. I think, I fear sometimes that I was naive.
Me too.
Yeah. And that's something I actually love about New York. New York feels much more grounded and realistic about some of the risks associated with this. Like, I thought the Arab Spring happened and I thought it was done. I thought like democracy just won forever. Now. Like it was it. Like and clearly, clearly history tells a different story, and we're still living in the middle of that. So I'm not quite sure where it ends. I mean, hopefully it never ends. It keeps marching forward. But so many of us, it was a self-selecting group of people, of really optimistic people, of really idealistic people, and very young people, frankly, very young people. It was totally, I knew no one over 40 I knew no one. Think about who we knew working on these projects and who.
Yeah, but that's always true. Again, self-selecting for your cohort, and you
But it
know.
was uniquely self-selecting because the technology and the ability to understand the technology was
If you knew,
limited.
you knew, and that sort of aged you out if you didn't know. Yeah.
That's right. If you didn't feel comfortable on the tools. And so I think about that a lot. And I think I don't want to lose the optimism and the idealism, but you also don't want to be naive. And I don't know where the right balance is for that, but I think about it.
Okay, I got to do this. We've danced around this a little bit, but explain to me. So you do come to New York, and you can tell me how you do that and why in greater depth. But what I want to know, you've you've been in Silicon Valley. You come back to Silicon Alley. I want you, when you come here, to explain to me the difference between the two.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then on a larger sense, as we'll get into Tech NYC and all this stuff, what the differences are. But when you come here versus Silicon Valley, what's the difference?
Okay. I think the primary thing, like the 10,000 foot view, it felt really good. And I really wanted to be in a place where tech was just a part and not the whole. And when I was in San Francisco, when I lived only ever in San Francisco, I never lived on the peninsula. Also, I'm a city person, so New York is just much better for me. But putting that aside for a second, when I lived there, I say this all the time, actually, and it sounds kind of trite, but I totally think this is true. When I lived in the Valley, you met people all the time who were tech people who lived in the Valley. And in New York, you meet New Yorkers who work in tech. And the fundamental reason for this, and it still holds true, but was even more true then, and even more true before I came back, is that if you work in tech in New York, someone at some point has asked you, why aren't you in the Valley? And you have an answer that probably doesn't have to do with work. It's probably like, my family's here, my friends are here, I'm really into theater, I love music, fill in the blank. And what that means is you've got a bunch of people who love New York and who are here for other things too. Now, that means that just culturally, the tech sector is really, really different. There is clearly,
I'm going to point out there's a little snobbery to it too. Like, I don't know that. Do you think that San Francisco folk do that to New York City tech folk? Like,
I think that there is a different snobbery. People have their own snobbery about where you're from is a very common thing.
yes,
But I
yeah.
think the snobbery about SF was when I was there, and now is again, but wasn't for some time in the middle, but now is again, like, this is where you come to build. This is where the hacker houses are. We are
Mm-hmm.
serious. We do not, we are working around the clock, building our whatever. You can't go out without, you can't throw a stone without hitting a VC or an engineer. And that is, I think, a lot of the pride of the tech sector in San Francisco is around that zeitgeist. And here it's different. Here it's like, oh, I went to this amazing art opening, or
Right.
I did
The reverse
Yeah.
reverse snobbery is, well, there's no culture in San Francisco, but we have it in spades here. Like, I'm gonna paraphrase you.
Yeah.
Uh, something that New York City's unique advantage as a place where technology is that it stacks on top of other world-class industries, finance, media, fashion, healthcare, which allows startups to, quote, pivot almost anything and figure out if it's going to work. So that's interesting. The stack, we talk about software stacks, but the stack of industries.
Yeah. Well, let me build on that for a second.
Okay.
This is something I think is, well, first of all, I think what you said, your paraphrasing of me, is dead on. I think that is one of the major, major value propositions for New York. If you are building a tech company in the media space, if you're building a tech company in the fashion space, in the real estate, whatever, why wouldn't you want to be around? You can, technical talent now, you can find technical talent. But what you uniquely have in New York is subject matter expertise, really strategic capital, mentorship, who knows about the industry in which you're building. Okay. So I think that that's like a major advantage for New York. But I think a lot about the internet kind of in waves, in stages. I'm going to totally oversimplify. I think also a lot of your listeners will like call me out for all the things by oversimplification that I am missing, but just, kind of bear with me. You have obviously a lot of the early infrastructure on the West Coast. Okay. But then just before I lived there and while I was there, the application layer was really built on the West Coast, mostly in the Valley, but also, of course, Amazon and Seattle. And that was because of the introduction of the iPhone, of course. But the application layer that made the internet accessible to everyday people was built in this moment in time. And the biggest companies, which are still the biggest tech companies, were all from this time. And they were all succeeded for a lot of reasons, but I think one of the major reasons those companies were so successful is because they were built in this vacuum. And government wasn't really paying attention. Competitors weren't really paying attention. These companies had crazy names. No one on the East Coast really took them seriously.
That's a point I've made a million times.
Yeah,
yes.
I'm kind of speaking generalities, of course, but it's like, oh, crazy company called Google in like an office park.
Weren't taken seriously in the sense that like not even in the innovator's dilemma sort of way. Oh, they're coming up from behind. It's like, well, that's a joke. It's the Chris Dixon thing. The next big thing is always thought of as a joke.
Correct.
Yes.
Right. Until all of a sudden, especially because of network effects, but until all of a sudden they were so big that you couldn't not take them. I mean, obviously you couldn't not take them seriously. Okay, so we are past that. Like now the pendulum has swung just completely in the other direction. If anything, the competition, the regulators, everyone comes after these companies really, really early. I think that actually bodes well for New York. Well, I just think I shouldn't say that bodes well for New York. I should say New York has the competitive advantage in that landscape. Because the days of just like heads down, build in a vacuum, like that's just not happening again. We see it now with AI. We're much earlier in the cycle. We're talking about regulation everywhere. We're talking about competition everywhere. There's
when you say heads down, building in a vacuum, you're almost saying that no one's paying attention to you, so you're not getting the spotlight shown on you.
Right. So you can there's
no pressure.
That's right. Right. That doesn't happen anymore. Obviously, we're just in a different time. So I think that cities like New York, where people have built relationships across sectors, where people, just kind of are better integrated into these systems, I think tech will really thrive because of that. In New York, you cannot only know people in your industry. Like, I don't care who you are. I don't care how rich you are. Like, you are on the subway, you are walking around, you are bumping into other people. There are parents in your kids' schools who, it's just a total melting pot of all different kinds of people working. And tech will never be the biggest. Tech will be the biggest industry in New York. Let me paraphrase that. Tech will never be the only biggest. It will never be a single industry town. It will never be.
It won't be a one industry town, right?
Right. That will never happen here. So I just think we then have the better skill set to handle some of these challenges because we have cross sector relationships. I know someone from like this club I'm in, or I know someone they met at the theater, or like another parent at school or whatever. I'll call them and just ask what to do. There's just so much more of that here.
Can I jump to the founding of Tech NYC? Yeah. Tell me the background of it. Fred Wilson, Tim Armstrong. Actually, no. Tell me, if as far as you know, where the impetus for this came from, and then how did you get involved?
Yeah. Okay. So I moved back here in 2014. Yeah, I moved back here in 2014. And when I was moving back, I'd had a couple conversations. There had been, before I moved back, a couple efforts to set up some kind of industry organization. They never really got off the ground. I knew a little bit about them.
And an industry organization specifically for tech as an industry in New York City.
Yes.
Yep.
New York City focused. Okay. They never really got off the ground. That was before my time. And then I got back here, like I said, at the end of 2014. I had a baby in March of 2015. So I was heads down for a little bit. And then in about, let's say September, October of 2015, I started having a series of meetings. Fred and Tim, like you said, Kevin Ryan, Desiree Gruber, Kevin Sheekey. I'd say those were the first five. And
what is the agenda of those meetings? Like what?
first of all, it wasn't all with all of those people, but
But
there were,
what's the energy like? What is trying to
yeah,
be? Yeah.
I think, you know, there was energy to create an organization to represent the tech industry in New York City. I think that Bloomberg had just finished his mayoralty. He was back at his company. And so a lot of people who had worked for Mike were thinking a lot about how to ensure tech continued to thrive in the city. So I knew some of them and they kind of reached out like, have you thought about this? And then that was kind of how I got hooked up with Tim and Desiree, who worked with Tim. We had all talked about it. And I said to them at that point, well, I know Fred and Kevin have explored this before. I'm not doing this without Fred and Kevin. And so we talked to Fred and Kevin, and like we all just were having these conversations. And it was one of those things where we just kind of kept having meetings and conversations. And then the next thing I knew, I was like, oh my God, this is real.
Well, and they want you because you have the experience of the policy and
Yeah,
the
I knew.
EFF and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, I knew, and I think with with the benefit of hindsight, I think in many ways one of the reasons I was a good candidate for this is I knew a lot of these people from my work in DC, from the federal work I had done, but in New York I was still pretty new, right? I had just moved back, and like I said, I just had a baby, and so when I moved back, I was kind of like no one's horse, if that makes sense. And in so much of what we do at Tech NYC is political, small p
Well, interesting.
political and big P political. And I don't think anyone felt, I don't know if this is true, it's my perception, of course. I don't think anyone felt like I was their person.
Or you're a threat to their
Yeah, like
agenda.
I kind of knew them all. I was kind of like a little bit like Switzerland in that I was very pro tech. I knew my tech.
Everyone thinks you're on their team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we just kind of kept putting one foot in front of the other. Like sometimes I think of myself like an accidental founder. All of a sudden one day I was like, oh my God, I think I'm starting this organization. Like what just happened here? And so that was the end of 2015. And then early 2016, I started working on it in earnest. I hired a woman named Sarah Brown, who is still here. She's chief strategy officer. She was the original chief of staff. Her first day was March 1st. That's when we got health insurance. That was, and like there are a bunch of like little things. The reason we're called Tech NYC is because my husband found the domain name. It was available. Tech NYC. There's a lot of stuff like that. He still finds all my domain names for me. He loves to find a good domain name. And then we launched in May of that year of 2016. And the reason we picked our launch date when we did, God, I'll never forget this. There's a great article in the New York Times. It must have been, I think, May 4th, May 6th, maybe it was like May 1st, because it was that week. The reporter was Steve Lohr, and it was a pretty long story. There's actually, there's a picture of me in it with my dog who came to the office with me in New York City, which is kind of rare. And it was a story about the growth of the startup sector in New York. And it announced in it that Tech NYC was launching. The whole story was not about Tech NYC, but
this was 2016. It's the growth of the
the startup sector.
Startup sector, yes.
Still felt really nascent. And I just remember where I was sitting when it came out, and we were freaking out because we had a party scheduled for like Wednesday night. I think it was a Wednesday night party, and we just needed the story to publish before. And then we had this party, and Fred and Kevin and Tim, they were all there, and Bill de Blasio, who was mayor, was there, and Senator Schumer was there, and we had a bunch of real estate people there, and it was a huge party. It was packed. You like couldn't move. And I think that a lot of people in New York politics, not tech now, but New York politics, really took us seriously after that night, because
realize you were a constituency that mattered.
That was right. And we had 40 members when we launched. Oh, and one other quick thing I'd say that I think is really relevant, and I don't want to use the word struggle because I think that's too strong of a word, but one unique challenge of tech in New York that was really true in 2015, 2016, and remains true, but different in 2025, 2026, is that still some of the largest tech companies are not headquartered here. Now they're huge employers,
Mm-hmm.
10,000 employees
Mm-hmm.
here, but they're not headquartered here.
Yeah.
And people in New York are used to having the CEOs sit here
Mm-hmm.
in other industries. So there's a little, one of the things listen, we could have launched an organization in 2015, 2016 that had 4 or 5 members, and they weren't New York companies, and we could have kind of been just representing the biggest tech companies. And I really like that. I had no desire.
So what you're saying is it's like Facebook has headquarters here, Amazon, blah 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 blah, but it's versus Etsy. They're or
right.
a Datadog or whatever. Yeah.
They all had to be involved, right? And it was Etsy, and it was in those days, it was Foursquare and Kickstarter and Warby Parker, and they were all involved from the beginning. And it was really, really important was that they were at the table right next to Google, who already had a huge presence on the West Side at that point, and Amazon and Facebook, and they were all and companies like Bloomberg LP too, which is a huge tech company here, of course, and that we had small startups and the biggest employers, and that it really was a big tent.
I, again, for the interest of time, have to align some
I feel
things.
like I'm talking way too much.
No. Believe me, it's called oral history for a reason.
Does everyone do this?
No, the people that I like are the people that talk a lot. So you're in my good book right now. Right. So, just for people that are listening, again, founders, tech folks, or whatever, give me Tech NYC's pitch. As opposed to your history over the last decade or so. Tell me what it means right now today.
Wait, there's just one moment I have to.
Yeah, please.
From when SOPA and PIPA, these big.
Well, I'm sorry, you keep bringing that up.
Yeah, I just want to talk about that for a second. I was still living in San Francisco then. The Congress was trying to pass these bills that we all were calling the internet killers. It would have basically broken the open internet. And a lot of people worked really hard. I worked really hard on it from San Francisco at EFF, but the New York tech community really stepped up, and Senator Schumer really stepped up, and there were protests here, and Senator Schumer showed up, and the bills killed, and that there was that moment. And then also there was net neutrality, which is another really big policy fight we worked on with the New York tech companies after that. And those moments really, in the political sphere, really solidified the New York tech scene.
I was going to say, has New York been, I don't want to say it's stronger because the FF, again, was born out on the left coast, but like has the New York City tech scene been a little stronger in terms of defending policy and things like that around tech?
That's a good question. I'm not sure.
Better was probably the wrong way to put it.
It has been active, and it has changed a lot over the years, but there was a time in the 2010s where the New York tech sector was really close-knit, and there were a number of essentially like network companies. Most of them were USV portfolio companies, but not all. And they were incredibly active in policy work. And there was this group of us, and it was there were some CEOs, but a lot of it was the policy people at the companies, and we were on the Amtrak. We were going to DC, we were doing the thing. And it was a great moment in time. It was also a very optimistic moment in time. Anyway, I felt like I really want to call that out, but let me go, in the interest of time, let me fast forward to
to the Tech NYC, please. For today, for someone listening today, why you should get involved, what you're doing, and what the purpose is.
So let me say Tech NYC is an organization that has members, tech companies in New York. I shouldn't say most tech companies in New York, many tech companies, all different sizes, many investors, they're all members. And we do a bunch of work to ensure that New York City is the best place to build and grow a tech company. That means, of course, that's very abstract. That means a number of things. But what it, I guess, means in practice is we spend a lot of time, we focus on city and state policy and politics. We work in Albany on a lot of tech-related bills. There's a lot moving right now there that would impact how technology works here. But over the years, on the policy side, one of the big shifts is we're working more and more on issues that impact all New Yorkers, because people who work in tech are just New Yorkers. And as the industry has grown, as the workforce has gotten a little older, they care more and more, we find, about things like, public safety and good schools and functioning subway systems and making sure it's a place people want to live, because the companies, we fundamentally believe the bargain is the companies will want to be here if the people they want to hire are here. So we do a lot of work, I would say, to make sure this is a place where people in tech want to live. That also means we partner a lot with the city and other organizations to do work around education, workforce development, not just attracting technical people, but also training New Yorkers. I mean, I could go on forever, but let me take a step back and try and frame for you how I think about our work, especially kind of the second half of the last decade. It's about to be Tech NYC's 10-year anniversary in 2016. It is inevitable that tech will be, if it isn't already, the biggest industry in the city. Listen, I run an organization called Tech NYC. I have no idea how you define that. Every company is a tech company, like say however you want to say it, right? As the city makes that transition, we spend our time at Tech NYC thinking about what that means for New York politically, what that means culturally, what does that mean civically, what does it mean philanthropically, as technology, both the people and companies building it and the technology itself changes our city. We want to make sure that that transition lifts as many boats as possible. And the way to get that right, we think, is involving the companies, but more importantly, of course, involving the people who work at the companies in the city and state.
The workers, the stakeholders, the communities where those workers and stakeholders live, etc. This is I never know how to frame these sorts of questions, but so if you're looking to the end of the decade for the New York City tech ecosystem, what would you like to see? See again in the AI era, through the AI lens or whatever.
Let me give you a slightly more political spin on.
Okay, do it.
If you will.
Because I'm bad at asking questions.
Yeah, well, let me tell you. Okay, well, I think you're great at asking questions, obviously, because I've been talking like a nonstop for a while. But I think that when I think about, 2030, 2035, I hope that New York City and New York State government are using technology well for New Yorkers, that that local government is working. And we all know that working means that there's some level of tech involved. I hope that there are people who are working for the city and the state, maybe as mayor or governor, or in other other important roles, running large New York institutions that aren't just tech companies, who come from the tech industry, who've thought about how to solve problems with the tech mindset, and that the tech employers and the companies across the city are really good partners to the city and the state, and that the city and state is a good place for those companies and the people who work at them to be.
All right, very, very last one. Anyone listening that is an early stage founder, what's the smartest way to get involved with either Tech NYC or with the New York City government when you're starting out right now?
Okay, so I've got a couple quick answers. One, we have a daily digest email. We've got a daily email that you can sign up for at technyc.org that has a ton of information on this very topic, how to get involved, how to be around.
And the email is?
Well, you can just go to technyc.org and sign up straight from our site. And I think there's a lot of information in there. It's a quick hit. And I think you could get it. I just have to say it's a great daily newsletter because it talks about tech, but it also talks about what's going on in the city that maybe doesn't have anything to do with tech. And so you get the cross.
It's about joining the actual tech ecosystem, the culture and
So, I think one of the challenges, obviously, with building a startup is how do you balance the networking and the need to go to events with the actual building? But you have to do some of both. If you are someone who either is building a company in the government space, you want to sell your product to government one day, maybe, or maybe you just want to get involved in the city or the state somehow. You live here, you're building a company, but you also really care about safe streets, or you care about, you should literally just reach out to Tech NYC. We're a pretty small team. We're about 14 people, and this is what we live to do. We live to plug tech people in to the civic infrastructure of the city. That might mean working with a local nonprofit. That might mean volunteering for the city. There's a bunch of fellowships. Like, that is my world. That is my team's world. We know those people. And you can literally send an email to info@technyc.org. There are humans who read that. I am one of them. And someone will answer. That is the best way if you really want to get involved. And you should join Tech NYC, which you can, go to technyc.org.
Well, but think about that as a resource. You know, that old sort of hoary cliche of like, you show up in New York City and you've just got the clothes on your back or whatever, and you don't know anybody. No, you do.
That's right. You know us.
Tech NYC can help you get your feet and build something great. Julie, thank you so much. This has been amazing.
Brian, this is really fun.